forgot the Scholar was in Destiny 2. Literally just pulled that from collection. Do you have sentimental attachments to these sunset things, or can I just run through deleting most of them? Welcome to Destiny Hoarders. In this series, I'll be curating vaults of some of Destiny's biggest fans, searching to find what's bad, what's better, and what's best. Managing your gear can be a major struggle when you try to account for stats, perks, archetypes, comparables, and even playstyle compatibility, but my goal is to help guide you to better understanding what to look for in your favorite gear pieces. But along the way, we gotta take out the trash. Since this is the first episode, I'm gonna go ahead and set some ground rules for how I'll go about curating. Firstly, the awesome players who let me look through their vaults are more than welcome to set any restrictions they want on which gear is excluded from the trash pile. I'm trying to help people out, not shard irreplaceable items. Secondly, I try to take into consideration every weapon's possible alternatives across the vault. If the best scout rifle that a person has is terrible, it doesn't change the fact that it's their best scout rifle. I don't want to put anyone in a position where they need to replace anything. Thirdly, and lastly, it should go without saying that some weapons can have comparable rolls or even multiple god rolls. The simplest example is that a god roll for a PvP Fatebringer versus a PvE Fatebringer is going to look pretty different. With that all said, let's get started on player Zhonq's vault. Thank you, Zhonq. At a first glance at this vault, I'm immediately seeing a bunch of sunset weapons, and as far as I'm concerned, if you don't have a sentimental attachment to these, they just should immediately be gone. This is just legendary shards that haven't been converted yet. Bungie's not going to unsunset weapons, as we've seen with the return of the Moon weapons and the Dreaming City weapons. If they come back, we're going to have to get them again, so these are just taking up space. First weapon we're going to look at is Toil and Trouble, which is an aggressive frame shotgun. We've got 3 rolls here. There's a threat detector auto-loading, full auto-loading, and slide shot snapshot. Threat detector is going to have slightly better handling most of the time. Full auto will have a slightly higher fire rate, and then the slide shot snapshot roll is going to have better range, and it's going to be a lot easier to aim down sights based on the fact that it's got snapshot, so it'll counteract aggressive frame's bad handling by default. With full choke and snapshot, this one automatically winds up being the best in my opinion. I think the other two are both okay, but I would never pick them over something that had full choke and snapshot. Next up, we got the 7th Seraph CQC. We've got a quick draw Vorpal, quick draw snapshot, and another quick draw Vorpal roll. Again, snapshot's going to kind of be the winner here because you're definitely going to want to aim down sights with anything that is using full choke because that maximizes the benefit of the perk. Otherwise, it's not really doing anything for you. And the only way you're going to actually beat full choke is if you're using a rifled barrel, you really just absolutely nail the center of target so that there's no missing pellets. That works. But if you miss even a little bit, the extra range is supposed to make up for that. Full choke makes it much more likely that you're actually just going to hit all the pellets to begin with, so snapshot is something that you definitely want on that. On the other hand, Vorpal is not really something that you want on a shotgun for PvP, because as much as it sounds nice in theory when you talk about like a Vorpal Deadman's Tale, Vorpal on a shotgun isn't going to make you one-shot a super anyway, so you're probably going to wind up having to punch, and if you had a weak super that you were hitting with your shotgun, the threshold between where you would one-shot them with Vorpal or without Vorpal is just too narrow to actually prioritize that over something that gives you more use on a moment-to-moment basis, like Snapshot. Generally, you wouldn't want to give up range to make that happen, and obviously if you could get accurized instead of Assault Mag on that best roll, that would be preferable. But at the end of the day, being able to fire a little faster is also a meaningful benefit, and the difference in range from accurized to Assault Mag is just not enough to give up Snapshot in favor of a more or less useless perk. Next up, we have the Deicide, which is a 1-2 punch shotgun in this case. The whole point of this is to spec into a melee build where you're using something like Worm God Caress or Liar's Handshake maybe. Overall, while this isn't necessarily useful, I think it's worth holding on to just in case melee builds become really practical at some point in the next season. Next, we are on to sniper rifles. I think it's worth noting that Zhonq's vault only really has good sniper rifles, so there's not going to be a whole lot of, is this one better versus this one? I'll just talk about why the rolls that he does have are good for now. Long Shadow. It's got Rapid Hit, Triple Tap, Extended Mag, and ATA Scout, which I think is personally my favorite sight, and then a Reload Speed Masterwork. This is what you would call like a 4 out of 5 God roll because Field Prep is just more ammo in total than you would get from having Rapid Hit, and you get the same reload speed, except you don't have to hit headshots for it, so you get better reload, better ammo. But Rapid Hit is the next best perk. So having the 5 bullets in magazine or 7, if you put backup mag on it with Triple Tap, will take you to either 7 shots or 10 shots, which is really nice to be able to do to empty your magazine, and then also getting Triple Tap to boost your ammo economy by 33%. This is pretty much exactly what you look for in a 90 RPM kinetic sniper. Next we have Succession, It's a Reconstruction, Vorpal, Tactical Mag. This is already another PvE god roll. Extended Mag could be considered an alternative god roll where you could get 10 bullets in the magazine by using the backup mag mod on it. But with Tactical Mag, you already get to 4, which will take you to 8 with Reconstruction, and then you can put boss spec on it without worrying about the possibility of getting to 10 because you can't. And the sniper actually really clearly shows how the 5 out of 5 god roll thing is a pretty big misconception in the Destiny community, where what you really care about are the big 3, the magazine perk on most guns, that really matters, and then the 2 primary perks on it really matter, but more often than not, your masterwork has almost no impact on the way the weapon feels, and barrel mods can boost your range, but in PvE that really doesn't matter almost ever. In PvP, the barrel mods and masterwork sometimes matter a bit more, particularly on shotguns, but it's just not really worth talking about the vast majority of the time in the PvE stuff. If you're going for that 5 out of 5 roll or even the 4 out of 5 roll, more often than not, that's just to have the feeling that you got like a clean, perfect weapon, as opposed to having something that is actually going to outperform the 3 out of 5 roll in any meaningful way. Tangent over. Next up, we have the I-Kilo Sniper Rifle. This one has 4th times the charm, high impact reserves, tactical mag. As I was just saying a minute ago, this is really the big 3 perks you're looking for a PvE god roll, and it has them. The alternative that you could consider would be triple tap instead of 4th times the charm, which is going to be a little bit less effective sustained damage, but at the same time, it is a little bit easier to proc that, particularly if you're not specifically DPSing a boss with a giant crit spot, which is where you would obviously favor the sniper, but nonetheless, triple tap is an alternative. I would say 4th times the charm is better, and therefore this is a basically perfect PvE I-Kilos. Let's move on to pulse rifles. Our first pulse rifle is a Sacred Provenance. It's got rangefinder, snapshot, light mag, corkscrew, and a stability masterwork. But the next one has rapid hit, kill clip, stability masterwork again, and then light mag full bore. So on the bottom, it's got more range perks, but not quite the same range because of not having rangefinder. And on the top, it's got better handling and more range, but worse reload and overall worse damage because it doesn't have a damage perk. So the one with rapid hit kill clip is the clear winner here because it's going to be much better for any follow-up kills in Crucible or in PvE, and the extra range that you get out of having rangefinder on Sacred Provenance is just not going to make it compete with 340s at longer range. Next up, we got a Stars and Shadow. Both of them have Feeding Frenzy, and one has kill clip, the other has Dragonfly. I'm immediately moving away from the Dragonfly roll because that's more of a PvE thing, and if you were going to try and use it that way, you definitely want to have Dragonfly spec on it, which isn't really the most desirable mod to have on when you could just run kill clip and have minor spec on or backup mag or something to that effect. Whereas kill clip does not require that same investment, and on top of that, Feeding Frenzy is going to synergize more strongly with kill clip than with Dragonfly. I'm not necessarily saying the Dragonfly roll is bad, but there's not really a use case where you're going to prefer it to a roll that has kill clip instead. Next up, we got Grid Skipper. There's a Heating Up multi-kill clip roll and then a Killing Wind multi-kill clip roll. These are very close, so we're going to have to look at the other perks to try and decide which one makes more sense. And with only a little bit of looking into it, we can see that one of them has high caliber and the other has ricochet. And for me, that immediately makes the one with high caliber rounds better. Because on a high rate of fire weapon, high caliber rounds is very disruptive to fire through as a opponent on the receiving end of it. Whereas ricochet rounds just makes the weapon a little bit easier to use on your end, and high caliber rounds is going to feel about the same in terms of range and not quite the same with stability, but that little bit of stability just isn't enough to give up disorienting your opponent in the middle of flinch. Next up, we have hand cannons. Ancient Gospels here, we got rapid hit kill clip, rapid hit dragonfly. These are both basically god rolls. They just have different situations where one might use them. I can't say in good conscience that I would get rid of either of these, but if I was going to get rid of one or the other, I would probably pick the rapid hit kill clip roll because Dragonfly actually has some unique utility to it, and a Ancient Gospel that just has extra damage with kill clip is kind of nice, but at that point, if you're looking for pure damage, you really might as well just run an Igneous Hammer. Next, we have the Palindrome. We've got an Outlaw Rampage roll, an Outlaw Thresh roll, and an Overflow Rangefinder roll. If we're talking about PvP here, I think Quick Draw beats any of those perks in the first column, but Overflow would be the next best option, so the Overflow Rangefinder roll is immediately looking like my personal favorite for PvP. It also has Ricochet Rounds Extended Barrel, so I think that is definitely the clear best PvP-wise if you're looking for that particular roll on this. If we're talking about PvE, we're now between the Outlaw Thresh and Outlaw Rampage rolls, and I would definitely say that Rampage is my personal favorite there, but Thresh is actually pretty good. It doubles the super energy you get off of weak adds from, I think, 1% to 2% or something to that effect, which is a pretty big buff to super energy gains. But if you're in a situation where you need that Rampage to start one-tapping, Rampage is the better perk. If I was going to keep one or the other, I would go with the Rampage roll just because it's going to be better in a variety of situations, whereas the Thresh roll is going to be better in situations where you're fighting a bunch of weak adds. Thresh is really a perk where the main time you might want it is a situation like Fatebringer where it doesn't give up your damage perk in order to make that happen. I could see keeping all three here just because this is another situation where they do have slightly different intentions behind the roll, but my personal favorite of the bunch would definitely be the Overflow Rangefinder roll, because I think if I was going for a PvE hand cannon that was void, I'd probably just go with bottom dollar. Next up, we got submachine guns. We're going to start with stochastic variable. There's a feeding frenzy multi-kill clip roll, and then a killing wind multi-kill clip roll. I would definitely say just immediately feeding frenzy is going to be better, because with an SMG, it is very fast to empty your magazine. You're going to be reloading it a lot. And then with multi-kill clip especially, you're going to want to be able to reload quickly, both because you're going to be running out of ammo and because you're going to want to proc your perk when it's convenient to. A little bit more range through killing wind is obviously desirable, but it's just not worth giving up having extra reload speed in PvE. If we're talking about a PvP roll, then killing wind would be better, but you're not going to want to use a stochastic variable in PvP to begin with, and a multi-kill clip roll probably wouldn't be your first choice for that either anyway. As a good rule of thumb, if you're talking about PvE rolls, the two things that you really value are damage and reload speed, because those are the two things that actually impact your DPS. The only exception to that rule is going to be something where there is utility, and submachine guns do not typically run utility. The only counterexample, as far as I can think, being a weapon used specifically to make Warmind cells. Next, we got Extraordinary Rendition. We got an Outlaw multi-kill clip roll and an Overflow Rampage roll. I personally would go with the Overflow Rampage roll, even though Overflow is not actually very good in PvE in my opinion, because you're just not running over special ammo consistently enough to proc it with any regularity. But compared against Outlaw, when you're using an SMG, you're not really aiming for the head all the time. That's not really how SMGs are meant to be used, and they don't have a very high crit multiplier compared to some weapons. So Overflow isn't much of a downgrade over Outlaw. I would say Outlaw is a little better, but only a little better. But on the other hand, multi-kill clip on an SMG is actively pretty bad, because as soon as you reload, it resets whatever stacks you've got. Like, you kill 3 enemies, reload, you got multi-kill clip times 3. You kill another enemy, reload, you're down to multi-kill clip times 1, no matter how short that interval between those was. So Rampage is going to be a lot easier to maintain stacks and get that 33% damage buff all the time, versus multi-kill clip only being able to beat it when you got a times 3 up, and you just need to be mowing down enemies to do that, and there's just not really many opportunities in the game where that happens. So basically, this whole decision falls to Rampage is better on SMGs than multi-kill clip is on SMGs. And we're talking specifically multi-kill clip. If you could run kill clip versus Rampage, there'd be a little bit more of a decision to be had here. But that's not what we're talking about, so we're keeping the Rampage roll. Next up, we got the Grenade Launcher Ignition Code. They both have blinding grenades, so we're not going to compare that. Field Prep is much better than Ambitious Assassin. You just get an extra grenade shot on Field Prep, which is just nice because you get extra ammo. It's helpful for your reserves and can sometimes give you more ammo when you pick up a special brick. And then it also gives you much faster reload speed, which is far more valuable than being able to fire twice in a row, because you really don't even want to do that with a blinding grenade launcher most of the time. It's mostly for the utility of just having enemies blinded without having to worry about it. And then Ambitious Assassin also relies on getting a kill. Field Prep does not. So Field Prep is the clear winner by a good margin versus Ambitious Assassin. While Ambitious Assassin is really great on one-in-the-chamber type weapons, Field Prep is just better because the incredible reload speed you get out of it, plus the reserve ammo that you get out of it, is just pretty hard to beat. On the other hand, Demolitionist is not quite as good as Vorpal weapon, because you got to consider that this is still your special weapon. It's your next best DPS option behind your heavy weapon. So having Vorpal to give it that extra boost is a preferable alternative to having more grenade energy from a weapon that you're not even necessarily aiming to kill things with in the first place. The main goal is to blind them. That said, Demolitionist absolutely is the runner-up perk here, because it can be much more useful than Vorpal if you're fighting mostly red bar enemies. I just think that the major difference is between Field Prep and Ambitious Assassin, and while I would prefer Vorpal to Demolitionist, I would absolutely take Field Prep Demo over Ambitious Assassin Vorpal. It's not even particularly close, just because of Field Prep. Next, we have Hung Jury. We've got a Heating Up Firefly roll and a Heating Up Box Breathing roll. The Box Breathing roll is absolutely better for PvP because you can 3-tap with it when you proc Box Breathing. That is really strong. It is a very fast time to kill. It is pretty unavoidable if you get caught in that and you don't know that your opponent's doing it. Most people don't really like running scout rifles in PvP, so I don't know how valuable it is to have a good PvP scout rifle, even if it is objectively pretty strong. The Heating Up Firefly roll would be better for PvE, for sure, but at the same time, if we're talking about a PvE roll, I think there are much better perks that you can get than Heating Up or Firefly. You definitely would want Rapid Hit, and I think you would probably prefer Wellspring or Explosive Rounds over Firefly by a pretty good margin. Next, we got Sidearms. There's the 7th Seraph SL2. We've got one with full auto Vorpal and one with Hipfire Dragonfly. I would say those are both pretty bad. Hipfire Grip isn't really necessary on Sidearms. They have great intrinsic hipfire accuracy. Full auto trigger system isn't really useful on any gun. It honestly is more of a quality of life perk than it is an actual benefits your game perk. But Vorpal weapon is preferable to Dragonfly in my opinion, because if I was going to run the 7th Seraph Sidearm, I would be doing it because of an anti-barrier mod, and in that case, I would rather have Vorpal than Dragonfly. And if you really wanted to run a different sidearm, I think Brass Attacks, which is still available and farmable, is just outright explicitly better than the 7th Seraph Sidearm, unless you wanted to use Warmind Cells, despite the fact that they're getting really heavily nerfed. So overall, I would delete both of these. If I was going to keep one, it'd probably be the full auto Vorpal one, just because it's slightly better for champions. Next we have bows. We got an Imperial Needle with Archer's Tempo, Frenzy, a Draw Time Masterwork. Then we got another one with Impulse Amplifier, Frenzy. Archer's Tempo wins outright because Impulse Amplifier does basically nothing for you on a bow. It increases your reload speed, but the only time that matters is when you have Archer's Tempo procced, which you can't proc if you don't have it because Impulse Amplifier is taking up the slot. The increased projectile speed makes no difference because bows are actually hit scan in Destiny, not projectile, and even if you don't draw the bow back fully so that you make it a projectile, Impulse Amplifier doesn't increase the velocity in that case. So the Archer's Tempo Frenzy roll is just explicitly better. The Accrued Redemption that we're looking at here has a Archer's Tempo Rampage roll. This is a 4 out of 5 God roll, actually. It's got Compact Arrow Shaft 2 and Tactile or Polymer String, so it's really close to having the minimum draw time. This is just a really good bow. If you wanted to run a kinetic bow, this is about as good as it possibly gets, because it is a precision frame for the highest single shot damage, and then Archer's Tempo Rampage is absolutely best in slot on both accounts. Although I suppose an argument could be made for Explosive Head under certain situations too. Next we have rocket launchers. We have a Royal Entry with Quick Draw Clown Cartridge and one with Impulse Amplifier Lasting Impression. I'm gonna go on a tangent here, I can't help myself. So the Quick Draw Clown Cartridge roll is immediately the one I would prefer because Clown Cartridge gives you a guaranteed 2 rockets in the chamber, which is pretty sick. Quick Draw doesn't help that much, but at least it makes it where you can use it in midair without waiting for a long delay to fire. There are lots of things that would have been better in the Quick Draw slot, but I would have gone for Field Prep for sure. At the end of the day, it's really hard to farm Royal Entry, so I can't really complain too much about not having a perfect roll if I'm looking at a good roll, and I think Clown Cartridge on its own makes that a good roll. On the other rocket though, Lasting Impression is actively one of the most detrimental perks in the game, because if you fire a rocket into a group of enemies, you want it to explode immediately, and Lasting Impression stops it from doing that. If you want to kill a champion, you want it to explode immediately before it uses its barrier, before it becomes unstunned from Unstoppable, before it starts regaining health from Disruptor, and Vorpal is much better for that than Lasting Impression, which might explode too late. Between Vorpal and Lasting Impression has relatively 3.4% more damage, which is a very small margin more damage. It really doesn't help that much. But the downside of it is that it's not going to be great against bosses with immune phases. It's not going to be great against champions with immune phases or health regeneration. It's not going to be great against groups of enemies. And you're just giving up so much utility on the rocket for just the tiniest little bit of damage that is just unbelievably not worth it. And that's not even considering the fact that if you're talking about DPS where you just fire a rocket and reload and repeat that process, Lasting Impression is never going to actually outperform the value of a Vorpal weapon rocket launcher because there's just a big delay on the explosion. By the time you fired your 8th rocket with Vorpal, you've done all your damage, but by the time you fired your 8th rocket with Lasting Impression, you're still waiting for your damage to finish, and overall, yes, it is 3.4% more total damage. The amount of situations where you're firing all 8 rockets and then still continuing to do DPS doesn't really exist. Any situation where you're not firing your entire magazine with a little bit of a grace period afterward, Vorpal weapon objectively just does more damage, despite the fact that it has lower damage output per rocket. So, moral of the story here, Lasting Impression is bad. I don't know why people like it so much. They just hear damage number higher and then just jump on that. But in reality, it is just not a good perk. Hope you enjoyed checking out some of the gear in Zhonq's vault. It should be noted, this is not the entire vault. We really just don't have time for that in one YouTube video, and I really had to speed up my commentary to even keep it all in a kind of compact time frame here. So if you want to see the whole thing, make sure to check out my Twitch when I am doing these. I do them on stream. And I also have a Discord that you can join if you want to submit any particular gear piece or weapon for me to look at, and I'll give you a rating and tell you what's good and bad about it in the Discord. There's a channel for it. Thanks so much for your time, and I hope to see you in the next one. Before I wrap up this video, I'd like to take a moment to thank my sponsor, Evolve. I recently upgraded my PC for the first time since switching to PC at the beginning of Destiny 2, and it has been an absolutely incredible experience. The performance, both streaming and gameplay-wise, is just much better than before, and I'm absolutely thrilled about my new computer. Evolve has builds at basically every price point, which is really great for people who aren't quite as tech-savvy, or if you wanted to customize your build and get exactly what specs you're looking for, that's an option too. Either way, you can save on shipping, which is about $70 value, by using code SLAYERAGE checkout, and I'm going to put a link to that in the description, so if you're in the market to buy a new PC or upgrade one you already have, definitely think about checking out Evolve. Thank you very much, Evolve, for sponsoring my own upgrade.